Hello everyone, and welcome to our first seminar in our Your Essex community learning series. My name's Lee, I'm in the team at Active Essex, and I'm delighted to host today's seminar on securing grant funding successfully. Before I introduce my colleagues, I just want to touch on some housekeeping and share how today's session is going to work. So today the session is going to be a brief presentation followed by a discussion. The session will be recorded and will be made available after today on Your Essex Community YouTube channel. So you can revisit that at a later date and share it with your colleagues. If you're attending the session live, you'll receive a follow-up email with the YouTube link and also the other Your Essex Community learning resources. And for today's session, we have a Q&A function available. So if you do have any questions, please do feel free to ask them. And then where time allows at the end of the session, we'll answer these post their presentation and discussions. So today's session is part of the Your Essex Community offer, which is Essex's new voluntary and community sector support offer. Your Essex Community is a unified offer of support for the VCS in Essex, and it's aiming to really create the conditions that help charities, community groups and social enterprises thrive, provide access to quality support across a range of different topics, and also to empower the voluntary and community sector to navigate challenges independently, connect with peers and strengthen resilience. So currently available through this offer is an e-portal. So the e-portal is a digital element of the offer, providing information, advice and resources across a range of different topics such as governance, safeguarding and trustee recruitment. The e-portal knowledge base is ever evolving and adapting. So please do take a look at that post today's session. And as I said, more content is being added to that very regularly. This part of the offer is universal and free to access for any voluntary and community sector organisation in Essex. The supporting community participation element of the work. So the community participation element works is really about a strategic way of trying to create a culture in Essex that values and empowers active and engaged communities. So as part of this offer, you can sign up to a community of practice, which is county-wide, and this is all about showcasing really good examples and practice, facilitating and sharing learning, which really supports voluntary and community sector organisations, but also public sector organisations to really understand what works well and how we can get communities involved in local action. As part of this offer, there'll also be targeted local events where you can come and see community participation in action. And finally, the place-based support element of Your Essex Community. So this is about working with local organisations to really understand local needs of the sector and then how best we can provide support packages alongside local community partners. In addition to the place-based support, there's a county-wide learning series, which today's session is a part of. And we're also looking to host Meet the Funder and quadrant-based fundraising workshops, which Jamie will share some more information about kind of later on in the presentation. Now each district and borough across Essex has a local insight plan, insight-led place plan, and this includes local training events, learning opportunities, which will be made available post today as well. So do see what's available in your local places. As I said at the beginning, this will all be shared post today's session. So back to today, I'd now like to welcome my colleagues Kerry McDonald and Jamie Rhodes. Both Kerry and Jamie have had years of experience in bid writing, in the charity sector and building strong relationships with partners and funders. And we're also delighted to have Rachael Luckin from the National Lottery Community Fund and also Matt King from Trust Links, who will also be sharing their top tips and perspectives too. So Kerry, over to you. Best of luck.
Thanks, Lee, and good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. So, as Lee said, my name's Kerry McDonald. I'm a senior member of the team here at Active Essex. The reason why I'm talking with you today about this is I am a professional bid writer. We're not a rare breed, but I am a professional bid writer, and I've led many significant funding applications for Active Essex. I was previously the director of fundraising for a large national charity called Street Games. And before that, I spent many happy years providing lottery grants when I worked for Sport England. Next slide, please, Jamie. So in this webinar, we're focusing on the funding landscape for our VCS sector here in Essex, particularly grants. And as Lee explained, Active Essex leads on specialist place support. And our recent insight work has discovered some interesting stuff on funding. But before I just quickly run through this, I do want to reference here the fantastic work the Essex Community Foundation and our voluntary and service councils do in both a host of grant programs, but also providing excellent information and guidance about funding and grants. I'm sure you know them. If you don't know them, please use them. So in terms of the insight that we gave about fundraising, it shouldn't come as a surprise to you. It's the highest unmet need amongst our sector. A lot of you feel you're forced to compete for funding and contracts, and that better funding models would increase collaboration. And it's great that we've got National Lottery Community Fund here today to possibly touch on that. What came out of the insight was that core and operational costs are the hardest to secure funding for. But there is a broader commitment across the sector of a need to diversify income streams. And I'll come back to that in a minute. And there's too much reliance on short-term grant funding and a lack of confidence in securing the larger multi-year funding. Thanks, Jamie. Now, I put this slide up to give us context. Active Essex works with many superb leadership models. This one is from Joanna Macy, an absolutely brilliant woman who sadly passed away this year. She dedicated her life to helping organizations try and transform from despair into empowered action. And so I challenge you to say, what story are you telling as an individual or as an organization? On the right-hand side is the great unraveling, as Joanna calls it, which is we're all doomed and we're stuck in a doom loop. On the left-hand side is business as usual, just carry on as we are, which we tend to find is very common out there. And then Joanna advocated the great turning. We can do things differently and create a better world. Thanks, Jamie. And this also offers some hope and positivity for us. 83% of people get involved in civil society, from protests all the way to donating to charitable causes. Significant statistic. Thanks. So this is some stats from the Blackboard Institute and the Charities Aid Foundation and some other sources. I'm sure many of you can relate to them, but these are trends in UK funding. All sectors share the current economic landscape as their number one funding concern. Despite these challenges, now this is really important, more organisations reported a static or increased income rather than a decline over the last year. And so that doom loop I was talking about does not measure across the research that's coming out. And I do wonder where you are at the moment in terms of how your income is working. Government, local authority and NHS grants and commissions are a vital revenue stream for those who receive them, but in decline. And AI usage is significantly increasing. And Jamie will return to that in a bit. Thanks. And this reflects society's priorities and many of the priorities of the funders as well. This is what's popular as causes. It's in this country, but I think it resonates with Essex as well, dominated by health, children and young people, religion and animal welfare as the most popular causes. And a lot of those, of course, are linked to what we all care about, which is inequalities and deprivation. I'm sure you can see your mission or your cause in there. We can see ours, even though we feel Active Essex, we're about multiple outcomes, but we're second from bottom in terms of what the great British public feel they would like to donate their money to good causes. Thanks, Jamie. So income diversification I mentioned earlier is an important issue. And here's a list of 10 different types of income. I would imagine that most of you focus on just one or two or three of these, and they cover real broad scope in terms of large grants, what we consider over £20,000, where a large grant can often be six figures. Small grants under £20,000, fundraising events, individual digital giving, which has boomed over the last 10 years, securing funding from commercial and corporate, so that's businesses, traditional fundraising, which we all love, which is your cake selling, your car boot, your raffles, the more specialist area, contracts, tenders, commissions from the public sector, legacies and wills, philanthropy, which is major donors, and trading, which is things like charity shops and selling Christmas cards. And as Active Essex explore these in more depth in our forthcoming series of in-person funding workshops, which Lee alluded to and he'll talk about at the end. It's not the only plug we're going to give those workshops today. But Active Essex take on the diversification is that what we're seeing in fundraising is that many of these are now specialist, and that is a major trend in terms of the need for dedicated and skilled individuals or teams in your organization focused on these areas of income. Thanks, Jeremy. And this is how funds are received, income is received. It's dominated by grants, which is why we're going to focus today on grants. You can see 60% is grants, 20% government grants, making up 80%. And the others are much minor compared to grants. And when it says government grants, what that means is not just tenders and commissions from government, but also local authorities, the NHS as well. Thanks, Jamie. So what are the most effective types of fundraising? This is the return on investment. So for every £1 you spend on fundraising, what can you expect to get back? And grants perform well. You know, trusts give they give grants. There's over 10,000 grant giving trusts in this country. So for every £1 you spend on trying to secure grants, on average, you should get a £7 return. Legacies is by far and away the winner with a return of 36, obviously being in someone's will. And it's usually unrestricted income as well. But like I was saying before, all of these are specialists. Okay. Move on, please, Jamie. So I'm delighted to introduce my first guest. We've got two guests today, which is Rachael Luckin, Funding Manager for Essex and Hertfordshire. I'm really pleased to say, Rachael, welcome. And there's a really strong relationship between National Lottery Community Fund and Active Essex, which we really, really enjoy. But I'm going to start with a question for you. So just as an opener, so everybody understands, what are the main priorities of your organisation?
Thanks, Kerry. Thank you for having me. It's great to be here. Hi, everyone. Okay, so the main priorities for the National Lottery Community Fund. Gosh, I could talk for an hour on this, so I'm going to do it in a sound bite. Okay. We've recently updated our business plan, our strategy for the future. And so to that end, everything that we fund must align with our new priorities and our missions. The priorities are that we will be prioritising communities, groups, areas and organisations that work with people that face the most poverty, disadvantage and discrimination. That's priority number one. Secondly, we expect to see a good volume of beneficiary voice, community voice in the design, the potential delivery and of all of the projects that we fund. If you align with both of those priorities, then we expect you to match one mission at least. And so our missions are supporting communities to come together, reducing health inequalities, supporting children and young people to thrive, and a new one to the fund, supporting communities to be more environmentally sustainable. That includes giving quality green access to green spaces to those who face the most barriers. That's it in a nutshell. But as I say, presentations can take up to an hour normally, an hour and a half. So Kerry, you can be very free with my email. Anyone on this call that would like a chat, reach out. Kerry can share it with you.
And that's
I know
one of the principles.
sorry,
Rachel. That's one of the principles I want to share later is building relationships with funders. And it's great to hear you say that the focus is on poverty, disadvantage, and discrimination. That chimes very much with what we're trying to achieve here with Active Essex. Just in terms of priority, where does Essex fit in as a county into your priorities?
Okay, so you're jumping around. Essex is a really important, all counties are really important to the fund. So just so you all know, I work with a small core team. There's 5 of us in total. Helen covers Herts, Jamie covers Tendring and Thurrock, Sue, Brentwood, Basildon, Harlow, Epping Forest and Uttlesford. She's busy. Richard is Southend and Colchester, and I sort of mop up and sort of anything that falls desperately outside those areas or manage stuff that comes in times of extreme demand. There's lots of challenges in Essex, right? You know, we've got urban areas, we've got rurality, we've got coastal communities. Our portfolio of active grants has to really work across all of these areas, both geographically and thematically. And it's part of my role to ensure that our portfolio remains diverse. I mean, I would love all of the money from the lottery to go into Essex and Herts, but obviously that's not going to happen. And it's just, I think it's really important in conversations like this that we get across that we receive such a high volume of applications, which is really good, but it's also frustrating. It's so frustrating for organisations that we don't have enough resource to fund all of the really great projects that we see. I work on reaching communities, but it's really important to add, so reaching communities is our larger funding stream, but there's also Awards for All. That is our smaller funding stream, up to £20,000 over up to 2 years. But to put it competition really into perspective, from a reaching communities perspective itself, you're looking at around £14 million a year on average going into Essex and Herts. That equates roughly, these are very rough figures, to about 45 to 50 awards being made. We get like 300 to 400 on average applications to Essex and Herts every year. So that gives you sort of an idea of how intense the competition is. So yeah, it's quite negative.
In fact, this is really important perspective for everyone, I think, who's not aware, the scale of it, and the fact that you have a dedicated team for Essex. And I can speak from experience; they're extremely friendly, extremely approachable. But my question, Rachel, is what is the overall quality of grant applications like? Is it getting worse? Is it improving? What's the situation?
Do you know, that's what makes it so difficult. I've been with the fund now since 2018, and I can honestly say, hand on heart, the amount of rubbish applications I've seen, I can count on one hand. So, do the maths, add up how many I've seen since 2017. Everything is amazing. And that's what makes it really challenging, because often when I'm giving feedback calls to people that have been unsuccessful, they say, what did I do wrong? What didn't I say? What did I omit? You didn't do anything wrong. Your application was really strong. And sometimes we have to make decisions, as in we might already be putting a lot of funding into that thematic area and we can't fund everything. We're a generalist funder, so we have to keep our portfolios diverse. Like I say, competition is so intense, and that's why it's really important to look at the website, look at our priorities, look at our missions, because we are having to prioritise those applications that work to support communities and people that face the most poverty, disadvantage and discrimination.
And before I come to my next question, Rachel, let me remind everyone, please put any questions you've got for Rachel or any comments in the Q&A button there, and Lee will take a close look at them. What do you look for in a strong grant application, Rachel?
Oh, that's a good question. We could do this again in a couple of hours, but I'm going to keep it really brief.
Thank you.
In a nutshell, clarity. So who
Yeah.
are you? Why are you the right person to deliver this project? How do you listen to your beneficiaries to understand their needs and their wants? Have you got a track record of successful delivery, managing finances? Most importantly, what do you want to do and why? I think from a lottery perspective, it's really important to say, I don't care about grammatical errors, don't care about spelling mistakes. What I want is like the clarity of, most importantly, how by funding you, are you going to help the lottery achieve its own aims and ambitions? Top tip, before you even begin, check the eligibility criteria, the amount of applications that we get through from people or organisations that are just not eligible. The other top tip that I would say is think and plan your project out before you even start. What is your budget? What are your outcomes going to be like? Because if you are, especially from a reaching communities perspective, if you are invited through to the second stage, to have all of that information pre-prepared, then you'll be able to get it back to us ASAP, which will mean a timely decision, a timely outcome for you. Clear, achievable outcomes, how you're going to measure them, is always very useful. Who else you work with in the sector? Do you work in isolation? Do you know what else is going on, in your area, in your communities? How are you avoiding duplication? How are you working together, sharing resources? So yeah, I think that's about it. We can fund, Kerry, we should say that we can fund both new and existing activities, complete with core costs, which I know we'll come to in a little bit.
Well, and thanks for that. That's really, really helpful insight, Rachel. But one of the key things we heard in our insight and feedback from the sector was the concern over core costs. What is your approach to core costs?
They're fundable. I mean, I think it's fair to say that we appreciate that without a CEO, without your admin, without your staff on the ground, your project officers, without being able to pay volunteer expenses, transport costs, etc., your projects aren't going to be able to run. You've got to keep the lights on, you've got to pay your rent. Yeah. So, all of that is eligible. For us, I appreciate that these costs are unsexy, perhaps to some funders who might prefer to fund something shiny or new or innovative. But we get that they need to be funded in order for you to sustain your organisation and the service. So they are eligible. An insight, I suppose it's not really a top tip. If you're coming in for a large proportion of senior staff salaries, then consider having some organisational outcomes as part of your project and your application. I think that's something that's quite key. We can also fund organisation development as well. We expect you to build capacity to be resilient for the future. Is this a good time to talk about match funding, or are you going to question me later?
Very briefly, we've got about a minute. I've got one last question for you, but please do.
Okay, match, you don't have to have match funding. We can fund everything, as in the full project, not everything, life, but we can fund the full project costs. So for match, it can help sometimes to strengthen your application, especially if it's community fundraised, because then it's showing that community buy-in for your project. I could say so much more, but I've got a minute, so go on.
Well, we're going to, my colleague Jamie's going to touch on it in a minute, but just wanted to take very, very briefly, what's going on with artificial intelligence and grant applications?
You're asking me, I'm such a Philistine. But no, I mean, we've got a statement on our website that talks about AI. Okay. You won't be penalised for using AI in your bid writing to the lottery. However, there's a couple of real learning tips that I think it's important to share, stuff that I've come across looking at applications daily. So it's pretty obvious when something has been written with AI and not sense checked. So I would say keep the human in the loop. All I'm looking for is a very real understanding of what you want to do, why you want to do it, and how much money you need. So often AI generated applications say all the right words, but they make very little sense and they're quite generic. So they all look the same. So to that end, keep the human in the loop. I would say that if you're new to bid writing or you need a little bit of support, use it, but read it, reflect on it, and imagine, you know, hopefully I'm coming across as quite approachable. Imagine you were just talking to me and write your application like that. Your application comes through to real people, so it has to make real sense to us. Finally, my final word on this is do read your AI generated application. I've had so many examples of where it says our organisation is best placed to deliver this work because insert skill here. Don't make that mistake.
Oh, lovely. Look, thank you, Rachel, so much for your insight. I know you're not going away. You're going to take some questions at the end. For the time being, thank you very much. And I'm going to hand over to my colleague, Jamie.
Brilliant. Thanks, Kerry. Thanks, Rachel. That was really insightful. And I will touch on some of those points that Rachel mentioned a moment ago. But we also want to share the sources of grants. Often some of the questions we get in our half-day workshop is, this is great. Where can I find information about funding applications, grants? And there are, as Kerry said, there's over 10,000 grant-giving charitable trusts. And normally they're mainly registered to charities, but there's loads of places you can be looking. So some of the national ones that we've picked out, and this is not an exhaustive list at all, are places like Sported, My Funding Central, Tone to Us Grants. You can sign up for these websites. You might have to look at the criteria to see if your organisation meets what they're looking for, because they might send other newsletters, but have a look. A lot of them will also send newsletters. So if you're not sure where to look, sign up to the funding newsletter and access to alerts, because the newest opportunities will be emailed out. So Sported normally send, like, I think it's every 2 weeks, they send an updated list. So make sure you are having a look. What about Essex-based ones though? So Essex-based ones, there's several organisations you can go to. Again, this is not an exhaustive list, but this is just a start of the 10 where you might find some of those funding opportunities. Make sure you go to, so if you're a youth organisation, go to the Essex Council for Voluntary Youth Services. You can sign up to their newsletter. They share training, funding opportunities. There's loads in their email, so make sure if you're a youth organisation, definitely well worth signing up to that. Essex Community Foundation, Kerry mentioned earlier, they are another great organisation where you can actually book some time in with one of their officers, and they have a large portfolio of grants. But if you've got a project and you're not sure where it fits, speak to them, because they might have a fund that is suitable. They're really open to having those conversations. The other ones to look out for is going to the Essex VCSE Alliance, the Essex Association for Local Councils, and obviously your local CBS organisations. They may be aware of funds that are coming up in the local area. Alternatively, have a look at your local authority or Essex County Council. There are some funds out there that will be put through your local authority, or they might have a funding pot themselves. So definitely well worth. Just a point to say, when you're looking at the sources of grants or a funder, make sure that you read their guidance, and more often than not, they will have examples of successful projects. So you'll be able to see historic projects, case studies, but also who they're funding and what they're funding. So if you're not sure, again, well worth having a look at those. The other point I'd make is also contact your funder, and I know Kerry will come on to some of those top tips shortly.
Sure.
So what about AI? Kerry very nicely touched on that with Rachel. And if you want to see the lottery's AI policy, there's a one-pager on their website, which you can scan the QR code that's on screen now, so you can see what is coming from the National Lottery Community Fund. But what role should it play? We know it's increasingly being used. A lot of people are talking about it, not just for fundraising, for all walks of life and applications at work. It can be a force for good, but also wrongdoing. And we know it's increasingly being used for UK fundraising to improve efficiency and effectiveness. It does present significant opportunities to improve fundraising, but you must consider some of these things. What are the ethical implications of using it? Can we adopt a balanced approach to ensure AI is used responsibly and effectively? And when we're talking about that, is AI can be useful if you've got the AI platforms available to you. Some might be restricted, or you might have to purchase to use their premium functions. But as Rach said, always keep the human in the loop. AI can be very generic. It was once described to me as your assistant that wants to impress, but may hallucinate or make some of the information up. So you definitely need to refer to it, have a look at it, and refine any prompts that you're using. And a note on that is also to say is just make sure that you're not putting information that you wouldn't put out publicly into AI when you're doing your bid as well. So if the funder is asking you for financials and they're not necessarily confirmed yet through your accountants, would your trustees or your chief exec want you putting that publicly into the world? If it's a no, then please don't put it into the AI builder to help you with your grant application. And lastly, invest in training and resources. Your specialist teams, or if you're writing the bid yourself, make sure you understand what the AI output is, where that data might be stored, and what happens to that data once you have used it. Thanks, Gary.
Thanks, Jamie. So AI, some great advice from Rachel and from Jamie. Let's keep building on those top tips for grant programs, small grants and large grants. These are some top tips from Active Essex. Let's start with number one, partnerships. Most funders will expect you to do partnership working and reference that in bids. Need is an obvious one, but have you thought really about how you can evidence need? Waiting list is a great example, evidence from partners, as well as your stats and your surveys. Number three is really worth highlighting. Relationships with funders. You've heard from Rachael how approachable her team is. It's not always possible, but it really is important to try and build that relationship with funders. Funders like Colchester Catalyst are super friendly. And a lot of them are approachable. Don't feel that they're completely distant and you just submit an application. You can try and build a relationship. Number four is crucial. Monitoring and evaluation, how you collect your data, how you analyze it, and how you report it. Number five, sell your track record, sell your credibility. And number six is budget. Are your costs, your project costs, fair and value for money? Because a lot of them are exaggerated. And as Rachael will back me up, believe me, funders will check your budget costs. So please make sure they're sensible. Sustainability is on everyone's lips at the moment. Number seven, be clear about what will happen at the end of the project. We've talked an awful lot about do you fit the criteria in number 8, but you've got to read the criteria really carefully. Too many bids just try to jam a project into a criteria that doesn't fit. Number 9 is just straightforward. Answer the questions specifically. It's what funders like. Do not waffle. Number 10 is there's always a word limit. There's too many small grant applications that got way under. So if it's a 200-word limit, they're writing only 50 words. Don't go over, but don't go under on your word limit. Number 11 is essential. Do not write a bid or a grant application on your own. Always share with at least one other person and as a team. And it does beg the question, whoever's writing the bid, are they the right person in your organization to write it? You got to be honest with yourselves as an organisation about whether that's right. Number 12, funders absolutely love. What is the story behind the application? So if you write passionately about why the project is needed, that really, really does resonate. The last thing that isn't on here is website. If you've got one, believe me, funders, one of the first things they do is look at your website. And too many applications contradict what is on their website. So be careful about that. Thanks, Jamie. So you asked us to talk more about core costs, and so we have. This is our top tips around core costs, the funding of things like salaries, office accommodation, admin, and finance, the essential, what I call the essential costs. If funders don't fund core costs, incorporate them into the project costs if possible. If funders do fund core costs, like Rachael, itemize the core costs clearly along with the project cost. Now they're going to look at governance, your financial transparency, track record, because it's so important, because funders want assurance you're going to use unrestricted funds, which is what core costs effectively is, as funds. Grants, restricted income, other sorts of funding, unrestricted income is the way the terminology works. The penultimate point is build relationships with your funders. I've touched on that. And the last one is be aware of turnover or income thresholds. They often catch applicants out, and whether they follow full cost recovery or only in part. And thanks, Jamie. Here's the top UK funders for core costs, top left. And it's great to hear from Rachael that they welcome applications that have core costs. It's the National Lottery Community Fund. But ones I would point out they're worth looking at if you're not already looking at them. For core costs, they're Esme Fairbairn, Garfield Western, Lloyds Bank, and the one down the bottom as well, local trusts. It might be small amounts of money, but it will contribute towards core costs. Right, I'm ready nearly to introduce my next guest. Next slide, please. But I thought this would make Matt smile, talking of core costs. And this is what the great British public feel, not just the public of Essex. But most people would not object to funding a charity's core costs, except for the chief executive's salary. So let me introduce the chief executive, Matt King, who's chief executive of TrustLinks. Matt, delighted you can join us today. I don't want you to say too much on the funding of chief executive salaries, but I'm going to ask you just tell everyone, please, about TrustLinks.
Yeah, I've just come off my yacht to join you this afternoon, Kerry. So I'm pleased to be the Chief Executive of TrustLinks. I've been here for 14 and a half years. TrustLinks is a local independent charity for mental health and wellbeing in Essex. When I started at TrustLinks, we had 6 staff at about 100,000 turnover. Now we've got about 65 staff and we're just short of 2 million turnover.
Wow, okay. Brilliant. I know you have to do absolutely brilliant work, and you're what Active Essex, Matt, calls, you probably know this, an LTO, a locally trusted organisation for us, and we're delighted to have you as a partner. But at the moment, what is the overall funding situation for TrustLinks?
Yeah, so we've aimed to diversify our income and our funding. Obviously, it's a lot of work, a lot of effort in my part and my team to kind of create that range of income. Currently, about half of our income comes from the NHS, from NHS contracts. The rest is made up of lots of different grants, including lottery and Garfield Western and various other funders, Essex Community Foundation, those sorts of organisations, as well as increasingly from corporates, community events, of that sort of community fundraising, looking to work with major donors as well. And I mean, the ultimate goal is legacies as well, where you get those big chunks of unrestricted funding.
You're a large charitable organisation. You've just explained that, Matt. I was just wondering, does being an Essex organisation, does that help or hinder your fundraising?
I think it's an interesting one, Essex, at the moment, isn't it? Because it's going through so many changes with devolution, local government reform. So I think there are obviously challenges as well as opportunities with that. I think the opportunities are kind of linking in with those new structures as they evolve, trying to influence them. Obviously, the ICB is also going through significant changes. Obviously, the CVS kind of network and support is also going through changes. So, yeah, it's an interesting one to engage with. And I think kind of being there, getting your voice heard, being part of that landscape is really important. I think the other thing to say about Essex is that it's really diverse. It's a really huge county. It's got all of those different types of geographies and populations. And obviously, we've got our coastal communities, we've got areas of multiple deprivation, areas of high need, also areas of affluence. So, you know, engaging with areas of affluence where there are people that could be our individual givers, major donors, people that can donate goods. You know, there's a really vibrant industrial sector as well, corporates. So kind of engaging with them and giving them opportunities to give us money and therefore help their ESG, environmental, social and governance goals. And in terms of getting grants, which I know is your focus today, as Rachael said, you know, evidencing the impact of the most deprived communities, those coastal communities, those areas of deprivation, especially the diverse communities. So in Central Southend, it's a very diverse community, and kind of playing up those, well, not playing up, but just emphasising and advocating for those communities and getting resources to respond to them.
I remind you, if you have questions for Matt in terms of what he's saying, please put the question in the Q&A button. Matt, I'm really fascinated to know how you are adapting. You talked about diversifying income. Over the last 5 years, how has TrustLinks adapted to the ever-changing fundraising scenario and landscape?
I mean, COVID was a fascinating time, wasn't it? Because I remember when that first started and it was like, it's all going to fall off a cliff. There's not going to be any resources. What are we going to do? Are we going to have to make everybody redundant? And then all of a sudden, there were huge numbers of grants that came out, and we just had so many different funders offering different funding opportunities. And then obviously cost of living and other things have evolved since then. So it really is about responding to those opportunities, responding to the asks, and like linking in with those funders, and as was in your sort of top tips, finding out what those funders want and then adapting your services or your projects or your ask to kind of align with those funders' requirements and their criteria. There is a lot of funding out there. It is increasingly competitive. I think AI is growing that as well, because it is ever so easy to bash out a bid on AI, but equally, is it a good quality bid? Is it really responding to the needs, and can you actually deliver it? Yeah, so it's an evolving landscape, and there are lots of opportunities in there, but we just have to, kind of keep up with it, track it, look at things like digital as well. You know, we've had funding recently for a TrustLinks wellbeing app. Really exciting. You know, before COVID, we really weren't digital at all, but now, you know, we're really embracing that and thinking, how can we use our expertise, our team's expertise, to respond to mental health needs, getting, you know, a really good chunk of money for an app that then obviously gets our word out there, you know, our brand out there much more in people's phones, and people can see that we are a charity that can support them.
And thanks, Matt. And I did say earlier that, you know, fundraising is becoming more and more specialist and skilled. Do you have a huge team? How does it work within TrustLinks?
Yeah, so we've dabbled with having teams of people to support fundraising. So I do have within my team a head of comms and fundraising. We've got one full-time community fundraiser, and we're just currently recruiting for a half-time events and fundraising officer. In terms of the actual grants and contracts, that's staying with me. I was a commissioner back in the day. I worked for Essex County Council and local authorities in London prior to that, so I do understand the commissioning and funding landscape, and I think because I understand the projects and I've been here so long, it's quite easy for me to create a bid and link with the team. So getting somebody else in to do that, you know, just creates extra layers of complication and cost. So our fundraising team actually focus on that: corporates, community, events, individual giving, digital, that side of things.
That's really interesting, Matt. I've got a couple more questions for you. We wanted to have a clear theme of of core funding today. How does TrustLinks manage the need for core cost funding?
Yeah, core cost funding is a real challenge. One of the things I think is just keeping your core costs as low as you can. I mean, as you grow, 65 staff, obviously we do have to have central functions of HR, finance, all that sort of corporate infrastructure and central infrastructure. But it's kind of keeping them proportionate to the size of the project. Obviously, as you've highlighted, there are some funders that do fund core costs. So wherever you can and wherever you can apply specifically for core cost, then that's really fantastic opportunity, and I'd go for that. In terms of the project cost that you put out for grant funding, it is adding that percentage. So normally about 10 to 15% that you can say that's allocated for core costs, and then explaining what they pay for: HR, finance, insurance, corporate governance, all those things that cost. And as Rachel explained, funders do generally understand that does need to be there, and they ask you for all the things. They ask you for your policies and your insurance and all of that. They check and double check and triple check that that's all in place. So it does seem very unfair if they aren't able to fund it. I'd say the funders that don't tend to fund it is the capital funds, and they say, we'll just buy that bit of equipment for you, not taking into account the time it takes for you to write that bid, the time it takes to install that capital equipment, and just the overhead costs and infrastructure. But this is the game we play.
It is the game we play. But that was great advice about core costs. Just my last question, for everyone watching this webinar, tuning in today as well, what would be 3 top tips that you would give everyone today to enhance their fundraising, Matt?
Yeah, I'd say diversification's key. I think looking at all those different funding options, diversification across all the different grant income streams. We have had funding streams that have dried up, but then if you have enough other ones, you can keep the project going. So that's really key. I'd say networking. I think things like this and any other opportunity to interact with partners locally, building those partnerships, relationships with funders. You kind of pick stuff up as you go along. I think if you stay in your little silo, you don't do that. But if you're out there in the world, you do. And my final one is resilience. I think fundraising is really hard. You get knockbacks, you get no's. What I tend to find when I write a bid is I kind of put my heart into it, and I really passionately believe in what I'm bidding for. And, you have to kind of really believe in it while you're writing it and really think you're going to get it. Sometimes they turn around and say no. And, then I always go back and ask. I get a bit of a reputation for that. And then they go, well, we were just so overwhelmed. And you're like, so, you just have to be resilient to it, because, it's not your fault. It's not that you're rubbish at bid writing. It's not that the project's rubbish. It's just that those funders can't give everybody all the money. As Rachel said, there's demand is much bigger than the pot of money that's available. So resilience for charity leaders, bid writers, fundraisers is crucial.
Couldn't agree more, Matt. 3 top tips: diversification, networking, and resilience. For now, Matt, thank you ever so much. We'll take some questions for you in a minute. But I'm just gonna wrap up with the last slide, Jamie, and hand back to Lee. So just a reminder, as we've kept referencing, we've got a series of fundraising and small grants workshops coming up. You can see the dates there, where I'll lead them all with my colleagues, and we'll dig deeper into the issues that we've covered in this webinar, and it will certainly help you with your networking as well. So the QR code is there. Lee will reference this at the end, but please sign up. And the most important thing is these are free. These are free. Okay, I'm going to leave it there. I'm available to answer any questions that come to me, but Lee, I'm going to hand back to you.
Super job, everyone. Thank you very much. I've had one question just come in from Sarah, so we'll kick off with that. So Sarah's just said, really interesting point on bid writing, checking with another individual to go to through the application, but unfortunately in their charity they don't have that luxury. So is there what would be the recommendation there? So kind of an organisation looking to write a bid doesn't necessarily have the luxury of going to another individual.
Before I bring Rachel, thanks, Lee. Before I bring Rachel in, look, you know, you use your network, your friends, your family, anyone who you feel could add some value and provide some insight. Rachel.
I was just going to say that if you've got a local CVS, you know, they're a great person to cast an eye over an application for you. Or as Kerry said, if you've got organisations in your partnership that you work with, you know, they will support you too.
Super. Thanks, Rachel. Kerry, I'll just put you on the spot with this, because I remember years ago, one of the pieces of advice you gave me about bid writing was, at this point, go and ask a friend, a sibling, your mum or your dad, and see if they really understand what you're writing and if they can make sense of your application. And I think that just resonated with me there. And back to Rachel's points earlier in the session about we just need this absolute clarity in the bids to be able to make an informed decision. So yeah, Sarah, I guess my advice would be, do you have someone that you can lean on that can really read that, proof it for you and really understand it? And it goes back to what Matt was saying as well about kind of local support, kind of networks and peer support and relationships locally too. We've not had any other comments or questions come through the chat just yet. So everyone, please do, if you've got 30 seconds to have a think and would like to ask some questions, please do. Whilst Rachel and Matt was talking, I did have, selfishly, if you don't mind, I've got a couple of questions myself, if that's okay. So one for Rachel. Rachel, you shared the priorities of the National Lottery earlier, but I might have missed how long them priorities are kind of set for. And I just wanted to ask a question around, kind of Matt touched on this, we're in an ever evolving landscape at the moment, politically, socially, economically. Do you foresee that kind of changing throughout that kind of period, or is that kind of set in stone, or is there any tips that we can potentially see on the horizon for organisations on the call to be mindful of potentially?
Okay, there was a lot in that. Let me unpick it. So first off, how long do you foresee our priorities being as they are? So our strategy is to run till 2030. But that's not to say, you know, we are ever evolving. You know, it's not just that we throw that out the window and then do something else in 2030. You know, we build on. We're constantly learning too. We expect the organisations that we support to be informed by community voice. We are constantly listening to the voices of our community, our grant holders, our applicants. And yeah, we do morph, we do change, just like your projects do too. And yeah, with the crazy landscape, how it is, do I foresee it changing dramatically in the future? Well, hopefully nothing like the pandemic that came left field and knocked our socks off. But I mean, you know, there's such a lot of challenges out there, isn't there? I mean, you know, the community cohesion and the socio-political unrest that we're seeing at the moment, you know, projects like that bringing communities together have never been more important. So we do listen to the voices of our service users, if you like, you know, our grant holders and applicants, and then B, what is going on in the world around us to inform our learning. Does that help, Lee?
Nailed it. Thank you very much, Rachel. No, really appreciate that. Rachel's asked a question as well, and I think we're probably all guilty of this in talking in abbreviations. Can we just like have clarity, Kerry, of what a CVS is?
Community and voluntary services. They go by wonderful different names across Essex, but yeah, they're the wonderful umbrella and infrastructure organisations that support the voluntary sector in a place.
Super, thank you. So we've had a question come through as well from Tony, who said, I can understand the priorities that are presented, but my need is often for maintenance of equipment used for priority groups rather than engaging new groups. So are there new approaches that I can try and fund the need for this? So I'll try and, so I can see what, so Tony's asked for funding here, I guess, is around equipment as opposed to a project or delivery. So how best can we advise Tony on kind of accessing funds for replacement of equipment. It's almost that core cost, I guess, isn't it?
Rachel, what's your criteria on equipment?
Yeah, we can fund equipment. I would say that equipment, and perhaps the wider project that surrounds the need for the equipment, is probably going to be an awards for all style of ask, you know, a smaller, under £20,000 type of project. We do fund equipment as part of the wider project costs, as in a minibus, for example, would be a piece of equipment, wouldn't it? Just like we fund capital. But again, there is so much competition around those sort of projects and those elements of funding. But yeah, it is fundable.
Thanks, Rachel. Matt, did you want to come in there?
Yeah, I'd just say that there are some funders that do specifically like equipment, things like Morrison's Foundation, that sort of thing, that you know, specifically look at that. Also, like local companies, they love to buy stuff. They don't like to give money for the well-paid chief executive, but they do like to buy, you know, screens or tools or whatever, and then see the photos of what they've actually paid for. Things like the Lions and Rotary and those sorts of groups love that sort of stuff as well. So yeah, I think you should be knocking at an open door for that.
Yeah, Bernard Sunley Foundation like equipment as well. They like to buy something, fund something tangible.
Super. Thanks a lot for that. And Matt, thanks for chipping in with that. And I'm going to come back to you if that's okay, because I think there's a relevant question here from Martin. So Martin says that they're very much a sport-based charity working with children, but wanting to build a community hub. Is there, but there seems a risk that they're considered a sports organisation. So how best can they approach wider community grants, i.e. for older adults and senior groups? And I just thought, perfect organisation here, Matt, perceived to be a mental health only charity by some, and actually how you've potentially diversed into other kind of community grants and groups and other resources working with people. Just wanted to see if you could give some advice there to Martin.
Yeah, I mean, I think there is something about your branding, isn't there, and how you set yourself up. I mean, some people would see us a mental health charity. Some people would see us as a gardening charity because we've got therapeutic gardens, and kind of that was where our sort of roots, our foundation were. So I think, as Kerry said, things like your website, look at like how you present yourself, your branding, like look at your charitable aims and objectives as well. If it is purely sport, maybe you can think about changing those. I remember 10 years or so ago, we expanded ours to include environmental education and awareness, as well as mental health and well-being and carers and vulnerable young people, just to kind of look at your strategic objectives as an organisation, who you're trying to reach, like how you present yourselves. And then I think it's how all these things are interlinked, isn't it? You know, children and young people's well-being is linked to the community well-being, is linked to environmental well-being. Like all of these things are interlinked, and then you can kind of sell your outcomes and your project to the different funders depending on what they're specifically looking for. I mean, a few years ago, Sport England, Active Essex probably wouldn't have looked at our therapeutic gardening and said, oh yeah, we want to fund that. But by working together over a period of time, we kind of made those links and demonstrated those benefits on people being more active, and then got funding, which was fantastic.
Excellent answer. Thank you, Matt. Hopefully that answers that question. Rachel, do you want to just come in on that point as well? And then I've got one final question before wrapping up.
I always say when I'm doing funding fairs, etc., is to consider your whole service as like a big Victoria sponge, a cake, and then you're going to carve that up. You're going to slice it up, and then you can see what slices fit with what funders, but you're looking at your service as a whole, as a big piece of cake.
A big piece of Victoria sponge. Excellent advice. So if we ever needed a soundbite to promote this session after, there it is. Superb. I'm going to ask just one final question, and it's from Sarah, who's asked about how they're hosting a 40th anniversary next year, and are they able to apply for funding for that? So I think this goes to events or one-off events. So I guess from the four of you on the panel here, have you got some top tips or advice for securing funding for one-off events or celebration activities?
I'm happy to jump in. Something I've noticed in my time where celebration events have happened is if you reach out to your network or local businesses, they might have be able to offer you pro bono support. So things like volunteers, they might be able to offer equipment, gazebos, if you're planning something outside. So although it may not be direct funding to put something on, you might be able to get some free things, whether that be equipment or time, from your network and your local businesses. And that has worked well previously. And also anyone from your beneficiaries that might know other people in their network, well worth reaching out. Who do they know as well that might offer some free support or be able to offer raffle prizes, those sorts of things, so you can raise some money.
Super, thanks Jamie. And then I'll pass over to Matt and then Rachel for the final words before I wrap up.
Yeah, I agree. Funding from corporates, that sort of thing. We've had corporates that have sponsored particular events, and the other thing is to use it as an opportunity to raise funds. So we had our 25th anniversary earlier this year, and we had a big event and then asked for donations, and actually quite a few people gave us checks, which was wonderful.
Yeah, couldn't agree more, Matt. I think that's brilliant. I mean, A for A, awards for all. Don't want to get caught out again using acronyms. Awards for all can be used. It's has smaller funding for events. However, the events themselves would need to be led by beneficiaries. You know, is this something that you're doing to celebrate your charity, putting on an event for your beneficiaries and for the wider community to raise awareness of what you do? Then awards for all could be for you as part of your 40th anniversary. And well done, Sarah. 40 years. That's quite incredible.
Yes, excellent job. Thank you, Sarah. Right, okay, that leads me to kind of close today's session. Just a massive thank you, Kerry, Jamie, and of course, Rachel and Matt for participating this afternoon. Some very eloquent responses and questions there, and hopefully everyone's left today's session more equipped and hopefully more, as Matt put it, resilient in their ability to be able to secure grant funding successfully moving forwards. Jamie flashed up a slide a second ago which had some of the half-day face-to-face workshops, which will be a bit of a follow-up from today's session. So please do book onto them if you can make them. There's 5 dates already organised this side of Christmas. And then we do really value your feedback as well. So please, if you do have time, just complete that. I've put it in the Q&A chat, as well as that Q&A, the QR code on the screen too. Please do share your feedback with us. It should be 2 or 3 minutes, but we'd really value that. And then finally, to say that this was the first of our Your Essex Community online learning series. And we've got 5 or 6 topics already kind of in the diary as well coming up. So utilising marketing to promote your offer, engaging local communities effectively, effective leadership for the voluntary sector during change, using inclusive language and communication, and how to demonstrate your impact are all available to book on now. So we'll share that information post this afternoon. That leaves me to say thank you very much, everyone. Have a fantastic rest of your day, and hopefully we'll see you at our next Your Essex Community Learning Series session. Cheers all.